Okay, we're going to get started. All right, so welcome everyone to the launch of Collect Call to My Mother, Essays on Love, Grief, and Getting a Good Night's Sleep by Horvitz. My name is Greg. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder, along with my lovely partner, Donnie Joan, of the Bureau of General Services. Thank you. We are helped out by our volunteer Bree today at the register. And we're happy to have such a full house on a Sunday afternoon. This is really lovely. The Bureau, for those of you who don't know, is a government agency for a government that does not yet exist. And the service that we provide is holding this space for queer culture. So we've been in existence. Yes, you're welcome. Thank you for coming. We've been in existence since 2012. We've been here at the center since 2014. And we survive in this harsh world by taking donations, selling books, and receiving your love and support. So we have a suggested donation of $10, but we always say give what you can, if you can. And if you're planning on buying books, you can certainly support us by buying books instead, if you prefer to do that. If there's change in the bags, I'll pass that around. If you'd like to donate by Venmo, you can do so at PGSQD, and those letters are all around you to your left, right, etc. If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room, and you'll get an email every other Monday about our many upcoming events. And I think that's all the housekeeping from me. I'm going to read a brief acknowledgement, and then I'm going to introduce our first reader. So the Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We are actively seeking to partner with and provide material support to a local queer Indigenous organization. We hope to make an announcement about this partnership in the near future, but in the meantime, we encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. All right, so it is now my pleasure to welcome Shelley Marlow to the stage. Shelley's been reading at the Bureau since way back in the beginning, down on the Lower East Side, so we're thrilled to have her back. Shelley Marlow is an author, visual artist, and palm reader. Belladonna's Lesbian All-Stars Chapbook series recently published Halloween in Edinburgh, a chapter from The Wind Blew Through, like a chorus of ghosts. Marlow's 2 Augusts in a Row, a novel, was published with art editions from Publication Studio. Heather Segel at Lambda Literary writes, Marlow writes with a fluid quality that pulls the reader through, combining the workday and the trippy together. Marlow makes a strong case for love in the face of all as the truest magic this life has to offer. Please welcome Shelley Marlow.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Lori, for coming in and having this event. Very exciting. I'm going to read. Could you make this a hair taller?
Oh, yeah.
Louder.
That's
louder.
All right, that's better. Thank you. Good. The Wind Blew Through Like a Chorus of Ghosts is the title of this new novel. The preface opens with a poem. I misheard someone say Shelley Narwhal J.C. Lilly traveled to 2121 and found cars that run on water, joyful that there will be a future. Pilar is an anagram of April. Pilar likes the darker skin between the cheeks of Swan's ass. I recently learned the meaning of the dream of a new room with a closed door as unknown parts of yourself. Assignment for all ages. Open all doors to every room inside. Gertrude Stein must know that I love her. As a ghost? No, as a silver disk of intelligence that floats over the Paris rowdy ghost cemetery. This unstable table. Did the cat like the toy bat? Walking in the air, Snow Person song. Shaman witches work with witches into power. Icons of trees, eggs, and orange hearts float around me, her, them, us. Long brown hair flies behind a twig of a tall, awkward tween in a 1970s purple plaid dress and a pink sweater as she runs on a suburban street below bare trees. Her shadow follows over orange, green, yellow, and red leaves. An older teen with red hair that floats around her face marked with fear, wearing a handmade 17th century gown as she weaves fast through oak, willow, aspen, and elm trees of a dark forest, both tense as if they are being hunted. Chapter 1, Brooklyn, Sunday morning, October 27, 2013. Thin, pale, blue-green light bled through the early morning curtains in Swan and Pillar's railroad apartment. Swan woke up early after a nightmare about two running girls, then flipped over, their body a house of cards that year. They tossed covers off so as not to wake Pilar, quietly rolling out of bed. Swan tiptoed through the library up to the front room to paint. A kestrel looked in through the front window. Beyond, the sun reflected off of the new building across the street that blocked the view of the sunrise. Sunlight broke into a quartet of sparkling six-pointed starred, tiny flat yellow, peach, orange, and red globes of light. Swan was thankful that the sunlight got in. Swan surveyed the sunny room. The aloe grew out of its pot and reached up ecstatically. The dragon plant branches grew to the ceiling, then curved down and looped up again. One set of fronds burst open and joined the aloe in ecstatic prayer. The portulaca dipped down below its planter edge, then looped up again in sexy praise, with tiny white blooms the size of pinheads. The basil plant was bushy, and the baby rosemary plant stood thin and shy. Swan thought, on the precipice of a journey, I always fall in love with my studio, the warmth of the morning light, the plants, and my pillow that I leave behind. Swan dipped the paintbrush point in black ink, then dragged the brush across a sheet of rice paper and made a perfect arced line, then stared at the line and waited to decide what other lines were implied on the page, what another line could build. An arc could be made into a spiral to imply rings of water after something dropped into it, or half moon, or long extended fallopian tubes. Swan's eyes stung in the sunlight. Then emptiness and tiredness set in, so Swan headed back into the darkened bedroom and dove under the covers next to Pilar. Swan had a low overhead and worked as a biannual literary magazine's prose editor and a palm and tarot reader at a restaurant while shopping around their artwork. Pilar got out of bed for her morning ritual of chai tea, then to check in remotely to her work. Swan drifted back to sleep on their left side. Their right arm framed their oval Modigliani face, their nose in their armpit hairs and under their short sleeve. A cell phone buzzed. Swan thought they turned off all notifications, but poked a hand out from under the covers and looked at the phone's brightened screen. In the quiet of morning, everyone's words in letters floated loudly from the screen. Everyone's voices were like bird songs in the forest, each different so as to distinguish themselves. A meta-electric face livre. Swan stayed quiet and turned off the phone without reading a thing. The letters dissolved in silence. Silence was welcome and broken only by a distant siren that morphed into a dog's bark. The cheap clock tick-ticked. The old refrigerator sighed. The air cleaner hissed. Nearby, Pilar coughed from the front room. Swan closed their eyes and saw an 8-point star on a Persian rug that floated in blackness. All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. It is always a tremendous pleasure to have Shelley. If you haven't read Shelley's 2015 novel, 2 Augusts in a row, check it out. We have it here. I read it. It's tremendous. So you will not be disappointed. And it is a place of privilege always that I get to introduce Joan Larkin. Joan Larkin has published 5 poetry collections, including Blue Hanuman and My Body, New and Selected Poems, both from Brooklyn's Hanging Loose Press, and recently completed a 6th collection entitled Old Stranger. She co-founded Out and Out Books during the 70s feminist literary explosion and has co-edited 4 anthologies, including Gay and Lesbian Poetry in Our Time, and has been a lifelong teacher. Her honors include Lambda, Annie A, and Shelley Memorial Awards, among others. Please show your love for Joan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Will you sit?
Oh.
Okay. Let me move to just something.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. Can you hear me in the back?
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's an honor and a pleasure to be reading in support of Lori Horvitz's wonderful new memoir. And I'm so glad to see some familiar faces. I'm going to let me just check the time. Okay, so I'm going to read one old poem and everything else from the new manuscript, but I wanted to read, in honor of the context of this great bookstore, I wanted to read one lesbian love poem. And sadly, my current contact with the person who inspired this poem comes from the blog she sends out to a large email list every Sunday. And so I know about the state of her taxes and dental work. And that's all it. Bringing you in. The scent you say is no scent, rises from warm ports between neck and shoulder. Scent that isn't witch hazel, vetiver, camphor, lemon, but is just your skin, raises a breeze on mine, unpredicted as freshness I found in woods where a few blonde leaves hung from twigs. Sweet sharpness, scent of something still to come, something soaked in. Chlorine on the cedar deck your thigh presses, foot drifting in water, eyes yellow amber behind closed lids, soaked in like sun in the river whose cold silk wrapped your body in August, opened dark folds around you, closed, opened around you. This is in a completely different vein from a manuscript currently entitled Old Stranger. Girls' Department. I stared at my shameful flesh in the three-way mirror. Mother, my guide, my witness, pinched me between her fingers, thinking aloud, could she work with a skimpy seam allowance, get it to fit? My model thin cousin Nancy sent me a box of hand-me-downs, soft wool skirts, an orchid sweater set a size too small, another girl's raiment. My sister meant well, mother instructed, then took me to Brigham's for a treat. Hot fudge, melted breast-like pyramids of peppermint stick ice cream, and I crunched the small clear candies with my teeth. I sang at a talent contest once, Indian love call, in a green tulle gown mother grabbed from a bin. She had an eye for a bargain. She took up the hymn. The first line of this next poem mentions a famous work by Jean-Paul Sartre, so that's what you'll recognize. Chain of events. It started with being and nothingness, and hiding a pack of Luckies in my school bag, tucking a matchbook in front without tearing the cellophane. I risked taking the streetcar downtown late at night. Did they never hear me? And basked in the gleam of Herb Pomeroy's band and the tang of underage vodka in orange juice. I quit sleeping in metal curlers, told everyone I was an existentialist, though I kept wearing my Peter Pan collar and gold tone circle pin almost right up to the night of the abortion. I gave up on the straggly page boy. I think that was part of what mother meant when she screamed, "Where did I go wrong?" This poem was inspired by a phone call about a high school reunion that I chose not to go to. And the last line, or the next to last line, refers to a place called Maes Howe. Maes Howe is maybe some of you have been there. It's a Stone Age site in the Orkney Islands off the northeast coast of Scotland, and it includes an ancient burial chamber that I crawled through. It's where some Vikings in the middle of the 13th century took refuge during a severe storm and left numerous graffiti on the walls. Dee's word for me. He must have rolled it in his mouth, smooth stone that came in on a wave, just what he wanted. Then he passed it to Elle, who tasted it on his tongue and dropped it, slick with spit. I wasn't there. N told me on the phone. He needed me to know my name came up and what was said. The stone's mine now. They like me to carry it. I've seen the word written, runes carved into a wall at Maes Howe by a gang of Vikings huddling in the dark. One fragment of 1980. I knew some of the women standing in a ragged circle, passing a lit joint pinched between thumb and finger. Watched it pass, their bursts of laughter, small explosions in my solar plexus. Pressed my sweating glass to my cheek, confused by the close dance I'd had with a woman whose drunk girlfriend watched, smiling and smoking. I studied a patch of sun on the floor. Weed smell filled the room. Don't you hate it? Thin, dark Linda next to me had seen my face. She joked about not knowing names for feelings. Mad, glad, sad. Weren't there 4? Scared shitless, I offered. I didn't say grateful. Didn't guess until the party in her name came back to me tonight how much I owed. Still owe that shred of smiling talk. Old stranger. When my lost carbon steel knife turned up as if it had never left the drawer, dark haft, trio of nickel silver rivets like moons of Pluto, thin blade stained as before, I breathed, spoke to the empty room, reached for the old stranger, touched its wetted edge. Alive, it could change tomatoes to glistening discs, basil to little hills, draw blood from meat. It raked joy onto my plate while the gauze that wrapped my cut reddened. Let's see this one. This poem, the last line is drawn from the line of a song I've heard sung on a recording by Peggy Seeger. There's 1,000 verses in this song, and I've tried to track it down so that I can tell you exactly where it's from, but you just have to take my word for it. Banjo, dulcimer, fiddle. Face resting in my palm. I stretched out long on the green lawn, listening. Not listening so much as loving how air shivered and sorrow was a tune, a light index finger downstroke, a slide joke, a note that repeated. My mind twanged with it. Grass trembled and shone. Banjo, dulcimer, fiddle, singing my story. Hush, listen, this song has 1,000 voices. And I'm going to read one more. And this is dedicated to the painter Wayne Thiebaud, who many of you know his work. It's so American. It's, beautiful cakes in display cases, a piece of pie on a dish, something you get at the deli, all painted with love of lavish use of paint. And the poem is called Lavished to Wayne Thiebaud. I'm hungry for it. Your double scoop of thick impasto on a scored cake cup stands downstage center, spotlit against flag blue, blameless. Even the shelf it sits on is slathered in edible pinkish milk chocolate paint. I'm hungry, and the bottom scoop is melting as the dangerously tilted top scoop defies Newton. The cherry glows like a lit button on a console. The whole treat is about to fall, but your squeezed pigment wants to feed me, and my eyes eat. Thank you.
You so much, Joan. I forgot to mention at the outset that after Lori reads, Joan, Shelley, and Lori will be in conversation and we'll take some questions. So begin thinking. Lori Horvitz's first collection of memoir essays, The Girls of Youth Lately, won the 2016 Gold Medal Ippy Book Award in autobiography memoir. Her creative nonfiction has appeared in a variety of journals, including Hobart, South Dakota Review, The New York Times, The Guardian, and Hotel America. Professor of English at UNC Asheville, She holds a PhD in English from SUNY Albany and an MFA in creative writing from Brooklyn College. In a starred review from Kirkus, the critic calls Lori's new book, Call to My Mother, a scintillating collection full of subtle wit and passionate yearning. Please welcome Lori Horvitz.
All right, we're good. We're good. Thank you all for coming out today. It's really great to see my hometown followers. And thank you, Joan and Shelley. I realized this morning, it's like, I've known you both for like almost 30 years. I know that's crazy. I studied with Joan at Brooklyn College. She was a mentor of mine. And Shelley, we met at a ghost house in Woodstock, Birdcliff in 1993. Right? And we tried to excise some ghosts from my room. And I just moved, but there was definitely ghosts. I'm going to take my glasses off for this. I'm going to read two short essays from the book. They're slightly edited down for timing. The first one is the title essay from the collection, Call to My Mother. It was cheaper to take a night train to Oslo than pay for a hotel. And on the train from Frankfurt, I met a soft-spoken blonde guy, the kind of guy who majors in business and takes up golf, who rose for his college crew team, who eventually takes over his father's business. The kind of guy I'd never typically meet, let alone spend hours sharing stories with at 2 a.m. We had just graduated from college, and his parents gave him a wad of money to backpack around Europe. And I'd been out of college for a year and saved up money from creating corporate slideshow presentations at a god-awful advertising agency. And there we were, the Manhattan hippie chick and the blonde golf guy sitting together, nodding off together and laughing together. With our giant backpacks, we made our way to the Oslo Youth Hostel, dropped our packs off and searched for food. We passed a post office where one could make international calls way before the days of cell phones and email. And golf guy said he wanted to call his parents. And I said, what the hell? I try to call my parents too. And we wrote down our numbers and gave them to the clerk and walked into booths. And I held the receiver and my mother picked up. The operator asked if she'd accept my collect call. No, my mother said. I sat in the booth for a couple of minutes, a little stunned. My mother said no. Then again, what did I expect? I knew my mother was stingy. After all, at McDonald's, she'd only get 4 bags of French fries and divide them among the 6 in our family. Of course, she didn't want to spend the few dollars per minute it would cost to accept the call. I walked by golf guy's booth and he was laughing, his raised foot resting against the wall in front of him. I told him my parents weren't home. It's not like I ever attempted to make a collect call before, not if you don't count the times I called from Penn Station on my way to visit my parents on Long Island, and the operator would say, collect call, and before they could answer, I'd say, I'm coming in on the 304 train and hang up. Now my mother said no. Years later, I took a financial literacy class for women. The instructor asked how we learned about money, what our emotional relationships with it looked like, and I remembered my mother not accepting the call. In groups of 3, we shared our experiences. One woman in my group began to sob. My father, she said, left my mother when I was 2. She only had a high school degree and had to support 2 small children. She cleaned houses. Some days we went hungry. Another woman in the group put her hand on the crying woman's arm. I told the group about my mother not accepting my call because she didn't want to spend the money. What kind of mother, I said, doesn't accept a collect call from her 21-year-old daughter who she knew was traveling alone in Europe without an itinerary? The crying woman snapped her head up. I gotta say, she said, that's just sad. I could have been raped or kidnapped or robbed. I could have been in an accident and broken my leg. I could have really needed my mother. I try to imagine what my mother did after she got off the phone with the Norwegian operator. Maybe she went antique shopping, or maybe she went to Frederick's beauty school where she stared at her freckled face in the mirror and made sure her hair color was red, but not too red. Did she think at any point that maybe she should have accepted my call? It's not like she couldn't afford to accept the call. My parents were school teachers. Besides, we weren't the keep in touch and call me when you get there type of family. I traveled with Golf Guy up to Narvik, where golds and reds and oranges lit up the sky, where we played frisbee under the midnight sun. Traveling to Europe was a sure way to get distance from my boyfriend of 2 years, the charming intellect who looked like John Lennon and called himself an anarchist. Every once in a while he'd rage and call me a cheap Jew, yelling that all museums should be smashed and made into community centers for the people. You remember him. After I graduated college, we sublet a room in New York City, but he left a month later and went home to Syracuse, claiming he hated the city and corporate yuppie scum. 2 months later, we moved into a gas-smelling apartment just north of Manhattan, but he left me again to finish his degree. I found an apartment share in Hell's Kitchen by the theater district with an aspiring cross-eyed actress named Twyla and saved money to travel. The boyfriend now wanted to move to Minneapolis, where he said we could start a new life, where his best buddy just moved to attend graduate school and claimed that Minneapolis was full of jobs and anarchists. I told the boyfriend I was going to Europe and I didn't know how long I'd be there. But after my mother said no, after feeling sad and lonely in Scandinavia, I made a collect call to the boyfriend. He accepted. He told me he loved me and missed me, and I said yes. This is how it started. My mother said no, and the boyfriend said yes. Minneapolis was not full of anarchists and jobs. After a month, we packed up my futon and sent it with us on a Greyhound bus, both of us thrilled to be back in New York, where I found an apartment in Alphabet City, an apartment that had its kitchen window shattered. The prior tenant moved out after a thief broke in from the abandoned building next door and took all his valuables and walked out the front door. But now it was our place, including roaches, mice, and bars drilled into every window. I never told my parents I lived with my boyfriend. We never talked about anything personal. And if he answered when my mother called, he handed me the phone. She never asked why a man had answered the phone. It's weird. Something happened to my mother between her college days, when, according to an uncle, she created art and was full of life, and her child-rearing days. Maybe the pressure to marry and have children, she had 4 children in 5 years, overwhelmed her. As a single child of Russian immigrants, a child growing up during the Depression, perhaps my mother felt lonely and scared. This might be the reason she found comfort in hoarding junk and taking control of money in odd ways. Maybe this is one reason why I traveled so much in my 20s. On the road, I didn't have to think about my family or missing them, or if they thought about me. I could wander and make new friends like the sweet Golf Guy. And maybe this is why I'd never considered Golf Guy as boyfriend material and instead pined away for a moody anarchist. It's over 30 years later, and my mother's been dead for a good portion of that time. 4 years after she said no to my collect call, a car accident took her life. I was traveling in Italy and didn't learn of her death until 3 days later. All the money in the world, I told my therapist, couldn't pay for a 1-minute conversation with my mother. What would you say, she said, if you could talk to her? We could have traveled together, I said, just us, and eaten all the damn French fries we wanted. That night, I dreamt I entered the back door of my childhood home and walked up the stairs. My mother stood at the landing and hugged me. I said, this is a dream, isn't it? She kept hugging me. I said, it's a dream, right? She continued to embrace me. I woke up crying. On a different note, this is called Search and Rescue. 4 months after I lost my longtime companion, Belly, a border collie corgi mix, I started to internet puppy date. In the meantime, I left my dog door open. Maybe Belly's spirit wandered in and out at all hours, like she did when she was alive. I searched for border collies or border collie mixes on shelter websites, Adopt a Pet, Craigslist, pet finders, rescue organizations, and at local shelters. I love the smarts, the energy, the regal looks of the border collie. Maybe I related to the obsessive focus of the border collie. Maybe it was snobbery, like the way I searched online for women who earned at least a master's degree. First up was a border collie mixed puppy advertised on Craigslist. I asked for a photo and what breed she might be mixed with. They thought beagle, but from the picture, the pup looked more like a Saint Bernard. I sent the photo to a recent ex, a veterinarian. All you need, she said, is a barrel under her neck. I didn't want a big dog. After all, my dog is medium-sized. Not sure if the owner intentionally evaded the truth, but in the internet dating arena, I had met plenty of liars, including a woman who said she lived in a big city, but actually lived 4 hours north in a frigid tundra. The same woman who said she didn't know what an alcoholic was, but made a point of letting me know she only blacked out once a month. And I went to visit her. I continued my search for a rescue puppy, but came up empty-handed. So I searched breeder websites. A shoe-sized, crazy-eyed border collie Aussie popped up. The only pup left from a big litter. Over the phone, the breeder said, "This one here is the smartest, but in buyers care only about their markings." I asked a friend to come along. I need an extra set of hands if I got the dog. We pulled into the driveway of the breeder's mobile home. In front of us were at least 10 pens of border collies and Australian shepherds, each with at least 8 dogs, all whooping and jumping, the stench of shit permeating the place. A frazzled-haired woman held a squirming puppy. She put it on the grass and the dog ran in circles. I leaned down to greet the pup. My friend leaned down and whispered, "Is this a puppy mill?" The breeder set up a small wired mesh and put the dog in, but the pup crawled up and over the mesh as if she were a monkey. Breeder woman pointed to a large border collie tied to a tree. "That's her mama," she said. At first, mama sat still and stared at me, so I walked towards her. Just before I got too close, she bared her teeth and lunged, reminding me of a woman I had met. Who looked good on paper. A successful businesswoman who owned a lake house and invited me for a long weekend. All went well until the third day when she had one too many drinks and stared out the window and wouldn't talk, and it was dark out, and I asked what was wrong. As if possessed by the devil, she raged, "I don't know what's worse, if you write about me or you don't write about me." Too paralyzed to leave, I stared at a revolving ceiling fan. In the morning, she apologized, promised it wouldn't happen again. It did. Next up was a stunning blue merle, a blue-eyed whitish border collie pup named Aspen. The breeder lived an hour away and wanted to meet me off I-40, since she'd have to pass through my town on her way across the state. And by the way, she said, Aspen's been sold. But Aspen's sister was still available. In the photo, her sister's eyes looked glazed over. When I talked to a geneticist friend, he said, "Do not get a blue merle. They're inbred. They have terrible problems, deafness, blindness, who knows what else." I met a beautiful woman, a demi-Moor devil, who lived across the country, who spoke in a language reminiscent of a Harlequin novel. I invited her to visit, to be my date at a wedding. She kept up the ruse for 24 hours after she landed until her facial expression turned blank. "What's going on?" I asked. "I have a girlfriend," she said. "So why'd you visit?" "We deserved a beautiful weekend together and we got it." A volunteer from the local animal shelter texted, "A sweet 1-year-old border collie mix just came in. Get here as soon as you can." The dog, probably mixed with Springer Spaniel, had been seized from a hoarding situation. A shelter worker snapped a leash on her and handed it to me. "She's never been on a leash before," he said. The dog froze up, and as if the barks of the other dogs were grenades, she tucked her head in and her tail in. Finally, I cajoled the dog to the street. She looked around as if just regaining her vision after years of blindness. Perhaps I wasn't the right person. She had a lot of baggage, more than I could handle. Then again, that never stopped me when it came to internet dating. Like when I met R, who lived in New Mexico. Her mother physically abused her. Her ex-girlfriend degraded her, broke up with her, then flaunted a new girlfriend in front of her. As soon as I came into the picture, the ex-girlfriend proclaimed her new beloved her renewed love for R. I didn't wait around to see if R went back, but I suspect she did. On petfinders.com, a border collie Jack Russell puppy, Sadie, appeared, a squat black and white wind-up toy of a dog. I drove 2 hours to meet her. She hid between her foster mother's legs and wouldn't make eye contact. When I tried to pick her up, she howled and ran in circles and barked at neighbors, reminding me of a woman I met on Tinder who lived with her mother. Over dinner, she told me her last girlfriend would come for the weekend, but by the second day, her mother would whisper, "When is she leaving?" And the woman would say, "I don't know, I hope soon." Back online, I found a beautiful border collie pup in Tennessee. The breeder sent more photos and I said yes. Something about her eyes reminded me of Belly, my old dog, intelligent and sensitive. Actually, she looked just like a baby Belly. She'd never be Belly, but yes, I paid $1,000. The breeder wanted me to meet off I-40. Said her husband was working on the house and it was too dangerous to come there. Now suspicious that she didn't want me to see a puppy mill like the one I had seen, I said, "But I want to meet her parents." "I'll bring her mother with me," she said. I didn't feel comfortable meeting her off the highway and asked if there was any way I could meet her at her house. I didn't have to go in. Finally, she gave me her address. I Googled it. Her home was 700 square feet on 1/10 of an acre and cost $18,000 in 2003. No way she could care for all those dogs advertised on her website, which featured border collies frolicking on rolling green hills. Nonetheless, I agreed to get the dog. The day before the exchange, I received an email. "Bad news. I brought the dogs in to be assessed for activity level, and the dog you wanted was assessed at super high level. She needs a lot of mental and physical stimulation. She can't get that in a regular home. But I'd be glad to sell you her brother, assessed at a retriever level." I didn't want her brother. Perhaps she found someone who'd seal the deal at a highway rest stop. Maybe I wasn't supposed to get a purebred dog. Besides, I shouldn't support breeders, especially breeders who want to meet off Interstate 40. And as a friend said, as long as dogs are dying in shelters, there's no such thing as a responsible breeder. Once again, I searched through rescue websites. A new puppy appeared on Adopt-a-Pet, a border collie shepherd mix. Her name, Panda. A tiny panda bear with curious eyes and a bloated tummy. A woman from a Georgia rescue organization told me she was found on the side of the road with her mother, a German shepherd. Mama was skin and bone, she said. I said yes. In the next 2 weeks, I learned Panda had parvo. She spent 2 days in the hospital on IVs, but she bounced right back, the woman said. I drove 4 hours with a friend to pick her up. A shelter volunteer placed 7-pound Panda in my arms. She wouldn't stop licking my face. The volunteer said she'd probably be about 30 pounds full grown. At home, Panda was a terror, biting, howling, ripping anything she could get her teeth around. One friend said, "She's a puppy, give it a couple years." The first 3 months involved patience, little sleep, and a life-size stuffed standard poodle. A trainer suggested Panda use that to bite instead of me, but she ripped its tongue off and pulled the stuffing from its mouth. The trainer looked at her paws and advised me to get the biggest crate they sell. Scared she might be part Great Dane, I had Panda's DNA tested, which revealed no signs of border collie. Her daddy was a street dog made of Dalmatian, Pit, and Boxer. Maybe I didn't know what was best for me when I checked off the preference boxes on Pet Finders and Adopt-a-Pet, or Match.com or Tinder. Although the woman who became my long-term partner had a profile on Tinder, I didn't meet her there. She missed my height requirement by an inch. 4 years after bringing Panda home, now at 62 pounds, she's all heart, and she could still fit just barely through my medium-sized dog door. Thank you. Shelley, also, just to let you know, my book is available at the cash register, and I'd be glad to sign copies.
That was so great.
Thank you. Joan wrote a great blurb for me, and I'll always be grateful. Besides all the gratitude of being my mentor, 30 years ago. So, I'm not sure what to say, but being a professor for a long time, how does, I'll ask you a question that people ask me. How does your teaching inform your writing?
Oh, gosh. I mean, you could probably answer that question better than I can. I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's just inspiring to see a group of people who are passionate and care about writing. And especially, I mean, I haven't been a professor for a long time. I never made it past assistant, actually. Yeah, it's a long story. It involves homophobia and other such things. I don't know, it just, it doesn't interfere, let me put it that way. I mean, because who has, you know, you don't spend all day writing. I don't know, try her.
Tell me how ghosts have influenced your writing.
Well, whoa. Where, who's that ghost? Where's that ghost? What's that? What do you mean? I'm teasing, I know what you mean. No, because, well, the name of my book is The Wind Blew Through Like a Chorus of Ghosts. And so, you know, I hear dead people. So
There you go.
and you know, and the is that good? I mean, we have an experience about ghosts. Should I tell?
Sure.
Okay, Laura and I met at a Birdcliff writing residency, and one morning I noted that she was all ruffled up, and I said, well, did you sleep? And she said, no. And I said, why?
There was a go, well, okay, so I woke up 3 times with a white face in my face.
Like a ghost right in her face. So I said, well, let me go to the room and meditate, and maybe I can talk to the ghost. And so this is my version of it. But so I meditated, and there was I felt chills, and telepathically I talked to the ghost, and I said, you're really scaring my friend Lori. Why? What's going on? And because the ghost and I were friendly, and and so the ghost said, well, I have a message from Lori's mother. Her mother wants her to think about her every day. And so I promised I would convey that message. And then the next night, Lori didn't sleep in that room, which I don't think mattered. But what did you dream about? I'm leading you. I'm leading the witness. You dreamt of it, Shelley, remind you?
Yeah.
Lori told me the next day she dreamt that her mother visited her in the dream. So the ghost wanted to connect them, and they did.
Was that the dream in the book?
The dream in the book. Whose book?
Her book.
Oh, is that the dream in the book?
Yeah, the dream, there is a, yes.
It
Yes.
is,
Yes.
good.
In the
It was
dream,
really great.
in the dream, the ghost came to me again. And then I ran into my mother's bedroom, and she was in bed with my father watching television. And I said, Mom, I just had this dream for the 3rd time that this white face was in my face. And she said, I've seen those orbs too. I've seen orbs floating around. They look like that. And she was pointing to the orbs, the round orbs that were floating. Yeah. What do you think of that?
Wow, well, I'm happy to say nothing like that has ever happened. Not that I'm not a believer. I mean, I would entertain a guest if it arrived, I mean, a ghost if it arrived.
All right, I'm wondering if people have questions for any of us? Yeah.
I came in but I was curious to know the name Swan. Has it an association to cruise?
Yes,
And the thing that I found strange is I haven't felt like cruise for like 50 years. And it's Swan's Way. And so I forgot sort of like that piece, but the whole essence of life and time was sort of like light and time and nothing sort of really happening except light and time and Swan's Way. And I was wondering why you chose Swan.
well, let's see, let me go back to the beginning. I had a friend named Sylvie who died, and I wanted to name my character Sylvie. And Sylvie, her spirit said, please don't. So I really just at one point had Swan's name be Philomena, which would be connected to my last novel, Philomena. And then the first novel that I wrote that hasn't been published yet had Swan in Love Again in the Lesbian Arabian Nights was the title of that first book. And so, and yeah, I love Proust, but you know, I think that's the story. I think that's the answer. Yeah.
I have a question for Lori. Your writing is very funny, obviously, and you seem to be a funny person. When you're writing, do the ideas come to you like as funny, or is it like, because I have heard that like from some writers that the idea comes, they write it, and then in revision, after revision, then the humor comes in because there's more perspective. So I wanted to know what your experience is.
Yeah, I mean, when I write, I don't say, oh, that's really funny. And I like, you know, I just write. And a lot of times I just actually cry when I write because things are just really painful. But during the revision process, I think that's when maybe the humor comes out. But sometimes I don't even know it's funny until I read it. I'm like, oh, I guess it was funny. But if people know me, like my sister and brother are here, my cousin, I come from a family of, you know, making sense of tragedy through humor. And, you know, the first time I was at an artist residency at Yaddo, and when I was in grad school, and I did a reading, and someone came up to me and said, I had no idea that you would do this Borscht Belt delivery. So yeah, it's through the revision.
Yeah. So I have like a kind of a similar thought is that after you've done that, worked through it and written it, you feel like a different relationship to your memories.
Absolutely. I through revision and revision, I feel like I find compassion for the people who I maybe once was angry at, or whether it's my mother or ex-partners. But nobody wants to read angry writing or ranting, right? It's just not fun, and you're not going to get anything from it, right? But I think it's important to just, when I keep writing and revising, to find compassion for whoever I'm writing about, and then compassion for myself as well. So.
No.
Oh yeah.
So I have a question for all of you writers. Now, there's been a lot of topics. I've enjoyed thoroughly everything I heard today, and thank you very much for inviting me. But how do you all feel about the threat of artificial intelligence as writers? I mean, it's been on a lot of, it's been a headline on a lot of different writers, such as Larry Block, a friend of mine, have discussed this with me in a sort of scary way, but he's trying not to be bitter about it, but I'm a bit frightened myself. Well, go ahead.
Well, I'm not trying not to be bitter about it. This comes up, I mean, it just came up in a class that I taught on manuscript revision in Arizona a few weeks ago. And there was one guy there who was telling me that AI would be writing our books for us. And I just, you know, AI isn't going to know anything that we don't tell it. So I just hate it.
Okay, well, I'm gonna tell you that when aliens come to visit us, they are gonna value the things that are made by hand. And there you go. I think we can, I'm not worried about AI at all. You know, I'm a visual artist as well and make things by hand and, you know, but there's a spirit, everything, I'm not afraid of it. I feel like we're better than that.
I'm a little afraid of it, as a professor of like first year writing. But maybe they'll spell better, you know. I don't have to do so many corrections. Other questions? There's a, yeah.
The things that the stories that you tell in memoir, are those the same stories that you tried at some point in your life to write in fictionalized form, or are they separate material?
Some of them are like in the, I haven't written fiction much since I wrote I got hired to teach fiction at UNC Asheville, where I'm teaching, but like 2 years into it, I started writing nonfiction. And I felt like nonfiction is really my thing, my nonfiction essays particularly, just because I felt like it's sort of like poetry, because I wrote narrative poetry, but then I could sort of expand out and crack it open. But I did, and maybe I'll go back to fiction one of these days, but yeah, I have tried to write things fictionally, but nonfiction is where it's at right now, so. Yeah.
You're gonna come out with one if you're a good poet. You're an amazing poet as well as a nonfiction writer. I don't know if I've read your short stories. Do you think you foresee a book of poetry coming through?
Who knows? They're with AI generator. Tomorrow.
No. The Old Stranger, the title of your book. Can you talk a little bit more about?
Well, I can't quite remember how that emerged as the title for that poem. You know, I do have, I mean, this is a real knife. It's a carbon steel knife, very stained, and they don't make them like that anymore. I mean, you can really sharpen it to a fine blade. And when it occurred to me for the poem, then later it seemed to have other associations, death, or revisiting people, places, and things from the past. It just, I don't know, it spoke to me because it wasn't something that you could pin down literally, and it just had some atmosphere around it. And so for now, it's the title of the book. I don't know if that answers your question.
Very excited to read.
Oh, great, thanks, Joan.
Other questions?
Ever think about doing stand-up comedy?
You know, I have these visions of maybe doing like a one-woman show about all my dating craziness.
I have a question for Joan. I was just curious if the poem about the reunion, what came first, that you wanted to write a poem about a reunion, or you wanted to incorporate the Orkney Island in that cave, kind of, because that's amazing.
Actually, neither. And poems don't come that way for me. I'm trying to remember. I guess, you know, there was a little, I love what Lori said about anger, and I was really angry about this, having this opposite or feminist conversation retailed to me, you know, as a friendly thing. And I don't know, it just, how can I explain it? I can't, I'm sorry.
I loved going to the Viking cave though in your reading, so thank you for sharing that.
I'm trying to remember whether that was a poem where, you know, sometimes a poem will just turn an unexpected corner and you go someplace you never planned to go, and that's how you know it's alive. You know, when you plan too carefully ahead of time, then it's just like a dead fish sitting on the page and nobody wants to read it. I don't want to read it or write it. So somehow those two things came together, and I don't remember exactly, how they lit a spark with each other again. But thanks for asking. I think I wanted to get the word rune into a poem. My agenda.
Other questions? Just this is to any of you, any or all, if you could talk about your writing process, like it was, I know, I hate that question too, but still, we're all, I mean, any writer is usually curious about that for other writers, but like you said, I wanted to get a rune, the word rune in a poem. I mean, sometimes like I'll, challenge myself to do something like that, but general question process.
I don't know what my process is. I mean, I've been answering every question with I don't know. That's actually the truth. I mean, I'm not disciplined. I don't have a schedule. I'm very distractible. I would really rather do my taxes than sit down and write. And I'm not kidding. And just sometimes something just seizes me, and it's actually gotten much harder as the years go on, because after I started publishing, I became much more self-conscious when I saw something on the page, and I started thinking about who might think what about it, and oh no, it's just horrible. And so when I feel like I can't put it off any longer, then I just force myself to sit down, and I often surround myself with what I call the sacred texts. That is, whatever 2 or 3 or 4 books I'm currently madly in love with. I mean, this week it's Eduardo Corral and Diana Delgado, fantastic poets. And I'll open, and sometimes I'll see a single word, or there'll be an energy or something that will be like Proust and the Madeleine, I'll think, oh, this connects with, and then it starts, and there'll be pages and pages of horrible mess in a notebook. And finally, and I'm sorry, I'm going on too long about this, but I'll just say the thing that something that I learned from the poet Jean Valentine. We sat across the table from each other for many years sharing work. And I had read all of this stuff about Artemisia Gentileschi, and I wanted to write a poem about her, the Italian Baroque artist, and who's famous for having been raped and having been in a trial and having fingernails pulled so she would be sure to tell the truth. And so all of this was on like 2 or 3 single spaced. It was a long poem. And Jean sort of drew a circle with her finger around 6 lines in the center. And she said, well, this is the poem for me. And I said, is it enough? And she said, well, for me it is. And now I'm happy to say that I can do that for myself now. So that's my process.
Thank you. Thank you. I think my process is, and I can't remember the writer who said this, it's like when you have an idea that you need to explore and crack open, it's like having a pebble in your shoe. It just keeps bothering you and bothering you until you just get it out of your shoe. And for me, like the collect call for my mother's story, I just had taken a workshop at Omega Institute on financial literacy for women. And then that memory came back. And I remember I was going to Ragdale, an artist residency, and I just free wrote about it for like a week. Every day I would just free write, and then just kind of go back and take the nuggets out. And that's how it started.
Let's see. For me, yes, I do a lot of revision as well. So this new book is based on a trip that Martha and I took in 2013. And when I was telling the story of our trip from Scotland to the south of London, down to London, it felt like a special story that was inspiring. And so I would tell the story a few times, like 2013. And then I realized it was very similar to that short story by Daphne du Maurier, Don't Look Now. And so that was kind of like a thing to aspire to write something that has that tension and expectation and play. And so let's see, and so I have periods where I write at night and then wake up early and write after 4 hours, because the day and the morning and the night brain are completely different. And the morning brain is very good for editing for myself. There's certain clarity, that this emotional distance that I love. And yeah, and I would get into a schedule when I was finishing the book. And if you look at my computer, it has maybe 130 versions of a complete novel. And so, and it's I'm just going to tell you what the book is based on. Pillar and Swan were going to the UK, and after the tickets were bought, gender nonconforming Swan got anxiety and consulted a channeler, and the channeler said, "You have trepidation because you were a witch in a past life. And when you go to the UK, you're going to discover all about that teen witch." So, okay, thanks.
I have a question. So it's for everyone, all of you. How do you feel like aloneness, loneliness, alienation, isolation? Does that inform your writing at all, or your process, your writing process?
Well,
And how does that show up?
I don't feel lonely. I really prize time alone, and I can't really write if there's somebody else in the room or in the house. It's just, I'm too codependent. I just imagine they need something from me. I should provide it. So, you know, I love living alone.
I'll echo that, and I'm glad to hear you say that, because I have a hard time being creative with Kristen in the house. So I'll also have our own places. Yeah, I do value my alone time as well, but it gets lonely sometimes. But, yeah.
Well, I find that as a writer, when the work goes out, it breaks a certain isolation for myself. Yeah. Because I do love my time alone and my working time, but also just getting the work out is a whole nother pleasure of communication.
Well, I think we need to wrap up. So thank you all for coming. You could buy our books and buy more books and support this amazing place. So thank you all. And thank you for
We will slowly pick up the chair, so don't feel a need to rush out.